Doing a little, we're on the road still live with Uncle Phil. Folks, I wanted to talk to you all about no one ever tells you about the middle part of life. You know, the middle of the road. Been, I'm in 42 now, married for almost 9 years, been with my wife, wow, almost, over 10 years now, 42, father of three. And no one tells you about the middle of the road when you get to this middle point in life. You know, you're young, you strive to be an adult. Once you're an adult, then, you once you're 20, by the time you get to 40, you've been technically adult for 20 years. From 20 to from 40 to 60, you're in the middle point of your life. Still a young man by most terms, older man compared to young 20-year-olds, but you're in the middle point of a life, and at that point, it's not for anyone who's entering in their 40s. Life is not, and there's a difference. There are men who are divorced, there are men who are married, still having families. Still at this middle point, I'm going to say it probably for both, even though I'm not single, is that life still can be good and great, but there's a whole lot of gray. There's a whole lot of, you got to have a little bit of grit to become successful, to live your life in your 60s so you can be happy. What do I mean by that? I mean that the same way that you had to get through school to, have a successful start of a career in your 20s by going to college and doing the things that you need to do to prepare for it, getting a degree at 22 and starting a career path, you needed 22 years to get you up to that point where you can walk out and potentially, start off and getting a job and start working and earning money to become successful. Well, what does the 20 to 22 to 40 look like that gets you to how you're going to live your life in your 40s? And you're kind of on the uphill of the mountain. And when you get to 40s, you're kind of at the peak because you're at the middle point in life. Life expectancy is around 70 something. So you're right at the middle, technically. And when you're at the top of that summit, do you look at your down, because you got to go down now, on the other side of the mountain towards the end where it's the final point in life? Do you like the descent that you're going to take? Does that road look um, nice traveling down that descent? But what I always tell people about is that once people get to the top, they quickly decide to go down to the bottom, to the other side of the mountain. And is that the 40s, is it an age, or I'm going to say 40 to 60, is that point in your life where you need some grit? It's easy to get complacent in life. It's easy to stop building in life because you kind of have things on cruise control. Your kids, you're married, you're kind of stable, you own a home, you don't own a home, but it's kind of that midpoint, you got a career. The things you're worried about in your 20s and 30s are not the same things that you worry about in your 40s. It's not. I don't worry about a job or a career. That's not something I concern myself with. I now concern myself with the future of my children. And now I'm starting to look at life from what am I going to be doing for 60 now? What am I going to set myself up with for when I'm older? And very few people think about that. When I was in my 20s, actually, I think I saw a movie. It's called, I believe, The Kid with Bruce Willis in it. And I saw this movie one time, and it was basically the premise of the movie is a really interesting premise. It was a young boy somehow meets his future self as an older man. I want to say, like, I guess, I mean, it's hard with Bruce Willis the way he looks to kind of guesstimate the age, but I want to say near 30 or in his 30s or 40s. And or vice versa. But the whole point is that he didn't really get along with the older version, his adult version of himself. He found him to be everything he hated. And so did the adult version. The adult version looked down at the child version that's living with him, and he couldn't believe that he was that way. And he couldn't believe that his older self had turned out so not to his liking, not what he dreamed about. And as they're progressing through the movie, in this movie, The Kid, he's getting The adult standpoint is that, hey, you didn't realize what we had to do to get to this point. Being an adult is much different than it was as my ideals as a kid. And basically, he had lost touch with who he was as a child that was growing up because he shed off the child and became a man. But what he did in the process, he didn't fulfill his life with any of the things that he promised himself he would as a child. And when I watched this, I could kind of picture me being in my 20s and meeting my 40-year-old self now and saying, if you met your older version of you, if you met yourself in 20 years, would that 20-year-old punch you in the face? Or would he shake your hand and say, keep doing what you're doing, we're going to be okay? What would he say? Or she say? Would she say you're doing everything to make my life great? Or would she say that you ruined my life with the choices that you made? And I don't like where we would have been. Can you meet yourself in 20 years in the future and say, yeah, I'm okay with the way you've been doing things? And a lot of that comes from the need to be accountable for one's actions. And further in the movie, as it keeps going along, the once they kind of reconnect, he gets back in touch with his child, the connection with his younger self, his childhood self, and they become more friends again. He changes the personality of his older self and things like that because along the way there were things that he wanted to do, like playing an instrument, always being a pilot, and it was like the person Bruce Willis turned into. He was like, "Yo, you let me down. I never want to become like you." And it kind of has a semblance of a father son feel to it, which I think is pretty interesting. And in that point, I realized that if you had to raise your younger self, could you do it the same way that you accuse your parents, or you're not happy with your parents and the way they raised you? And then when you become a parent, do you do any better? Do you raise your children better than what your parent did? And it's not just better because you can provide economic outcomes, or you didn't beat them, or you didn't abuse them, or you didn't do whatever you can take off as the one factor that's different. But do you have the grit? Do you have the mentality to get through the middle part? You know, I see a lot of times now with people, talking about marriage and how bad marriage is, and it's a one person's fault. It's generally they're blaming it on the women, but a lot of times I always ask the men, like, okay, what did you do? What's your argument and why she shouldn't have left you? What did you qualify for? And I see that a lot of times people don't understand. Like once you get past 7, 8 years, you made it past the first part that most people fail at. Most people getting married for love. They're not getting married for life and a lifelong journey together through hard through complacency, through everything's not popping in the bedroom, through you're tired, through you got to raise kids, through health issues. I've met people who've been widowed. I've met a woman, actually stayed with a woman as a guest in her home during my travels, who was widowed, young in her 40s, and left young children behind her. Her husband, late husband, left children behind. And I've met people who are older who've lost in their 60s, that have lost their spouse through health reasons, and they're now a widower, a man per se. And well, the wife passed, and it's the middle part of being with someone. And I tell my wife this often, is that sometimes people think a marriage isn't good. And when you look around, you're simply just going through a marriage. You're simply going through the middle part of a marriage. Outside of any kind of abuse. When I mean abuse, I'm talking about like somebody hitting you, um, you know, it's physical and it's threatening, your life is on the line, that level of abuse. But a lot of times, what you're going through is the normal part of going through a marriage, through a relationship. And I even told someone just the other day the examples of my children. When my son and daughter, they're very young, they're 8 and 6, when they're taking a shower, or doing anything, there's always an argument happening. There's always a disagreement over who sits where, who goes first, who. That's between two children, and it's day in and day out. If you're a parent, you know daggone well that your kids argue over the most stupidest things. Oh, like, and it's not going to stop. It's just going to keep on going. Well, that tends to be the way when I've owned two dogs. The dogs would sit there and get into little fights and scraps, not daily, but it would be to the point where, they had disagreements and snarled at each other or whatever else. They have disagreements over, whatever dogs disagree about. It wasn't unnatural for that to happen. So, and that's because they're in the same occupying the same space. And again, we still in this society want the sexy of everything. Everything has to stay sexy for the longest time. But, I once had hair. I once had a full head of hair like my children do. I once didn't have a gray in my beard that I now have. And the question goes is that are people, I'm at the middle point of my life, Can my wife love me as I'm aging? I'm gonna have health problems. Can a person stay with you through the gray, through the middle, to see you through the end? And a lot of people are getting married without understanding that, marriage is really hard. I talked to someone who, they're in their late 60s and their wife passed 7 years ago. And I told him, I was like, man, you only hear about divorces and people getting married. You never hear about the middle. You never hear about the middle of the road where, you've lost the freshness, you've lost the spark. And no one tells you about that. That's rarely talked about for the people who do make it past the first 7 years. And rarely do people even go into being married talking about the possibilities of marriage failing. I once had my father tell me, you shouldn't talk about divorce. And I'm like, why shouldn't you if it's something that you're going to come up against? Like that should be in the beginning of the discussion because a person's views on divorce can tell you a lot. I mean, no one wants to get divorced, but some people don't think a divorce is that bad. And sometimes people think of divorce because they're not really going through a divorce. It's an idea. Again, it's not they understand divorce is a process. It's not a final outcome. I've heard such podcasts such as Coach Greg Adams even talk about that, when you divorce a person, you still have to see them if you have children. When your kids go to games, when they have weddings, when they have grandchildren, you're still going to be attached to that person for the rest of your child's life that you're going to have to see, deal, and intermingle with in some capacity. Forget about if your children's young, they're going to get older, and as long as you both are living, there's still going to be interactions that you both are going to have. You're going to know about, potential health issues that's going on with this person. No one tells you that. And really, I think older generations tend to discourage you talking about the a divorce when you're dating because again, if you talk about those things, you're going to understand how a person perceives breaking up or a relationship. But most people don't have that conversation. And that brings you to the middle part where things do get to the gray, you know? My wife and I now we have our days full of doing our tasks, getting our kids to school, getting our kids, the new baby, then getting the kids off of school, off the bus, getting them the rest of their day settled, and then you have the end of the day where everyone's going to bed, and then we recycle and do it back tomorrow. There's not a lot of sexy in that day. There's not a lot of sexy in that day schedule, and when you're having that, you're going day in and day out doing, grunt work, doing the gray, doing the middle. And that's not the sexy part that society wants us all to have. That they tell us that's what it is. No one wants to talk about when the work has to be done, when you're in the mud of it all. Rarely people do want to be in the mud. Everybody wants to be in the sexy. Everybody wants to be, as thin as they were, as fit as they are, and life just doesn't get you that way. We expect not to hurt. When I say hurt, is not to have to suffer and sacrifice. I mean, I'm exhausted right now doing this video. But I had to do it because once you start something like a YouTube channel, you start doing lives, you got to keep at it. You got to keep working when you're tired. And I'm severely tired right now. I'm exhausted. But I have to do it because even in my YouTube journey, I'm in the gray. You know, not every, you go into YouTube thinking that you're going to have 1,000 views. You're going to have 1 million followers because you got a great idea, you got a great point. And it takes time to build it, man. It does. It takes a lot of time, but it takes consistency, and consistency happens when you're in the middle. You know, that's where people fail at is that people start off, they can be great. Some people fail in the beginning, but the people who are successful, they're consistent in the middle, in the gray, in the mud. Because 9 times out of 10, that's where you mostly are. You're mostly in the mud of things. And you look at your life, how long has a good thing or a good feeling lasted? Sure, good feelings are fleeting. Good times are fleeting. You have a great night at a bar or club. That's just the night. For the rest of the night, you got to deal with the after effects of a great time. A hangover can last well into the 24 to 48 hours, which means your Saturday, your Sunday, even late Sunday night may not be great. You may not recover till Monday morning if you party hard on a Friday night. The after effects of a great time are last longer than the great time itself. It's just true in life. But we expect to always have that great time, that sexy every single time. And that's just not the way life is built. And part of that is that because our society's geared us towards always seeing the model, you know, the when I say the model, like it's the IG model, the what is that, Victoria's Secret model version of things. We're sold that in life. And when we get to this point, we think we can just trade out and upgrade to another sexier model. And what we're finding as a society is that it doesn't work like that. Rarely do you ever get to change out and trade up. Generally, we're trading down for our current lives that we've chosen, the pathway we've chosen. Very rarely do we get to upgrade our lives, you know, the level up, level up. That's very, excuse me, that's a very unique factor that it's not for everybody. Not everybody gets that. Not everyone gets to upgrade, but we all feel that we should. That's because we're believing a lie. We're being sold again. Not told the truth. We're being sold the lie. We're being sold. That's what we say. There's a difference between being told and sold. When you're sold, it's all glamour and glitz. When you're told, it usually has things that you can consider. I was just on the phone with a potential buyer last night, and he actually owned land too as well. Was interested in more property that we earn, and he did have little reservations about the part that we don't allow people to live on our properties while they're paying them off, because I would say that's more of like a renting situation. I would never let you rent my property for 250 a month, even camping or my, you know, a small amount, because there's a liability that I have for that property as being the property owner. And not only on top of that, what if you have a police officer, you know, think that you're trespassing on private property because a neighbor calls and sees you there? You're going to try to pull out a contract, but you're not the owner of the property. They may not accept the documents, even if they are true. They may not accept my word as the actual owner, but it puts you in a bind. So we came up with the 6 month payoff window as a way to circumvent people having to take 65 months to pay off a property in full. I thought it was a good thing, the smart thing to do, because some people really want to own and can pay off a property. Even though they're not paying on cash today, they can pay off the property within a few months. If that's the case, then pay it off. And I talked to the person. I said, you know, he said, well, you know, your rules are your rules. I get it, because they worked in security, so they understand rules and regulations. And I said, yeah, but the rules are fair. They're common sense, fair rules that you can see and agree with. And we've also offered some concessions as well. We're not just saying you got to wait 65 months. We know some people want to camp on a property or use a property, but you should do it when you have the responsibility of it. Plus, also, I told him, I said, what if your RV leaks oil on my property? Now I've got to clean it up. You can walk away. And again, the The whole point was that we it was a balance, it was a balance argument, it was a balance understanding. You know what I mean? And that's something, again, it's like this is the grit of the day. This is exactly how you got to get through business, and sometimes you got to stand on things, stand on own principles. And people may walk away. You might see more people walk away than don't. But when I understood this business, I'm not going to let a time like now where um, sales can be a little slow. I'm not going to say I'm going to give up my principles that benefited me before just to get a person's dollar today and make them false promises. That means I'm selling sexy, not told the truth. If I'm, oh yeah, you can stay on the property. Yeah, you can do this. Yeah, you can do that. And I create this sensation that this property allows them to do everything that they want without considering that telling them uncomfortable truths would help them to understand. I don't want you to get in that situation, because what happens if that does happen and now the buyer wants to go away? Now they want nothing to do with you because they've had this experience. And no one thinks about it because we're trying to make a deal, a buck, or sell sexy. We're selling something. And I told them that, and I said, well, again, it's balance. It's fair because, it's uncomfortable, but it protects you, protects me. And on top of that, it's something you should think about as a landowner already yourself with other properties that you own. Any which way. Like I said, excuse me, they don't tell you about the middle part. They don't. They don't tell you you're going to be tired having kids, raising kids, that, I think in the last month we've had different issues wrong with all our kids. Ear infections, someone had strep, the baby's got issues, the baby's not sleeping, you got to wake up. This person had stomach issues. My son, he went to the urgent care. It's like when we this is February into March has been doctor month for everything, and that drains two parents that are working together. Hell, let alone one if you're one parent dealing with it. Like, life doesn't become sexy. Raising kids is not sexy, man. It's a beautiful thing, but it's an extremely hard thing to do, let alone do well. But no one tells you that. No one tells you that, yo, it's tough work, man. It's not, it's just cute boo boo baby. And then you got a grown kid that hopefully does well. But the whole middle part, yo, it sucks, man. It's taxing, it's tiring. It's not easy, man. And then the more kids you have, the more chances you're going to be of, somebody's got this issue, that issue going on. You got to deal with a whole bunch of things. They want to do sports, they want to do language, they want to do some violin, musical instruments, they want to do, some art stuff. You're pulled every which way. Your life is not your own at that point. That's what I'm saying. You got to kind of know what you're getting into, and you got to understand the part where you actually are a little bit more successful as the part where people walk away from, when you're right in the middle. The middle's where you want to be. Everybody's going to be married for the first year, because you know why? You get to just blow, you get to empty your load, and everything's about, it's new. Then you go into, it's like I said about before, a new car. You get a new car, then it's new, new, new. You drive it, and then after a while, you start kind of noticing, well, how the car runs. You kind of knows how many times you got to pick up, get gas. You notice when you got to do certain repairs. You notice how much things cost to repair it. You start to formulate opinions about your purchase of this car. You start to look at certain things, like how well it does compared to other cars, minor damages, or bigger damages. You start to kind of really understand the car more. And right then is where people tend to trade out. They tend to get rid of the car at that point. That's the relationship analogy. They tend to get rid of it at that point. And when they do, they're hoping to get a brand new car that gives them a better outcome. And that's rarely the case. Excuse me. And what you're stuck with is going through life trying to trade out opportunities, trade out a chance to get through the middle, to get to a better side. You know what I mean? Just think about any professional team. Professional teams don't always have, not everybody goes to championship, not everyone's in NBA finals. But a lot of teams have to still work, and they don't just quit because you're a losing team. You don't just get rid of a losing team because they're the losing teams. They have to go back out and become winners. That's it. I mean, even though a team goes to the NBA Finals and wins a championship, the middle of their season doesn't mean that they didn't have to work any less or they were always winning. And that's the thing about life going into relationships and marriage. Like most of the time, people are just not in it for the middle. They're in it for the beginning or the end. That's it. The middle's never talked about. No one ever tells you about the middle where, and that's where everybody wants to leave. They want to get out during when they're in the middle of life, in the middle of relationship, in the middle of everything. You know, you're supposed to be doing that. You're not supposed to be doing anything other than just trying to constantly improve your life or maintaining if you've gotten to a certain level or status. And but people want to trade it out like you're going to get something better, and chances are you're not. You're not. Not saying you should stay just to be on, but again, it's like a lot of times people are proactively trading out their marriage, and it's like, okay, well, what if you have to do 20 with another person? Like you still have the same requirements. It's not going to change. Requirements are not going to change. You still have to get through the work. You're going to have to get through the middle. You're going to have to do the work to get through the middle with a person. It's not going to change. Any which way, folks. Short spiel for today. It's on the road dropping gems. I'm sure you can see right now I'm super tired, man. I'm exhausted. But it's good because I want my children, my family, my viewers, my subscribers to see, man, Phil looks really tired right now. I am tired. But I'm doing this still talking about certain things because you never know when a person needs to hear something. There are people who are thinking about going through divorce or going through a divorce and they're not understanding that, yo, you're in the middle, man. This is not, life is not this rosy. It's not fantasy island, man. You got to get through some hard stuff. But I think if you push through that, later on you have a appreciation from the journey that you've been on to accomplish what you've accomplished in your older age. The getting the kids raised up to adults to be functioning, independent functioning adults, to getting to the point where you could build, a retirement, some form for your life. I mean, that's what it is. I really think that life is literally about the what you do in the front end to help your back end of life. I really don't think life is about the, because literally at your you're your most vulnerable in the beginning, and that's potentially when you have parents there, and then you're stuck left going through life for your second vulnerable periods when you get older, and not everybody, children do pass before their parents, and people do pass on their natural time. I've met older people who they live alone. There's no one there for them, no one. They get sick, no one's there. You might have a neighbor or two, and that person's living for 20 years like that. 20 years living all alone, where you're older than most people you walk by every single day. Talk about a potential sense of hell and desolation in one place, where you are walk everyone that you walk past is younger. Every day of your life you could be taken advantage of. You're a potential victim to, generally everyone you meet could be a potential threat to you and your safety. Just physically, just physically because of your older age and you're alone. Talk about living in fear most of your days. Now you could be, oh, I'm gonna go out there and do whatever else. Ain't nobody gonna mess with me. I'm a gorilla killer. But okay, that's fine. But when you're older, you look like a target to even the most casual passerby. You don't look like, I've never met an older person. I was like, man, they look super intimidating and threatening. Maybe not want to mess with them. And I mean, just think about being at that point in life. And I think that's our lives are set up to be taken care of in the beginning. And then we got to figure out how to take care of ourselves at a time when we can't, where we may not have the ability to look and call upon others. But that middle is the most important part to making those things happen. Because your parents are gone when you're 90. Most of them are. Very rarely you have parents who are older, and if they can't take care of you. Your kids may get married, they may have spouses, they may be going through their own relationship. You can't always count on your children to come in and help you. They can assist, but they can't just do everything for you, and you're vulnerable. They have their own lives. They have kids too, probably. Your kids they're probably grandparents too at that point. So what are you going to do? You got to get through the middle. You got to try to build and get through the middle so that way you can look back and say, man, this is a one hell of a ride. And that'd be a beautiful thing. As long as you man enough or woman enough to handle your situations, that is. But that's another story. Phil Davis, folks, Ancestry Land. I've done my 30 minutes. I've clocked in. Yo, I'm digging this light behind me, man. This is give me that little leg. Look at this. Ah, it's like angelic light right here. Who knew this would just give you the whole angelic flow behind you? But any which way, folks. Hope everyone's doing well. Think about the things that I've said. See if it works for you. Take care, folks. Peace.